Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Entrepreneurship Lab. This is your host, Nevena Bajalac, welcoming you once again to the podcast where we help you grow and scale your business. We discuss different topics. And as you know, we bring different experts in different areas and from different industries. And today we have a special guest coming to us from United States, Las Vegas. And he is an expert in IT business acquisition. His name is Michael Frew. And Michael is technology veteran. He has over 20 years of experience working with major players in IT field. And then he became an acquisition entrepreneur. And now he manages an 8-figure portfolio of cloud-based software companies. And he generates 7-figure in annual income. And he just told me his schedule is pretty clear for today. So Michael, we want to know how you got there, right? How you got into such a success in business, and yet obviously you have some free time for us today.
Well, that's a great intro. Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah, I'll do a little of background and kind of how I've gotten to this because it sounds great when you read it out in an intro. It's never planned that way, right? And so,
Yeah.
for your listeners, I come from a background of IT engineering and development. So coming out of a lot of the startup world. And so there's a lot of developers and engineers and IT professionals like myself where we work in the larger corporations and we kind of learn how business works there. And then we start looking at doing entrepreneurial pursuits afterwards. And what I thought was unique about my journey was I did about 18 years in companies and I always was trying to start businesses. And that's pretty much how people try and move out is they start a side hustle and they're looking for that to get some traction and then they're able to move forward. What I found completely accidentally, I wish there was a great Genesis story of me coming across this, like I really knew what I was doing, but I found that you could acquire projects and other businesses from other entrepreneurs that were either looking to go start a new project or just didn't have time for something that they were doing. So after about 18 years, I picked up just a really small side project from someone and this were just Amazon affiliate stores. And I really enjoyed that. And I had had enough experience with selling things online that I kind of knew what I was doing and realized this is the career I want to pivot towards now that I'm kind of coming to the end of that first 20 years of my career. And so that's what I focused on was how do I learn everything I can about how do you acquire online businesses? How is that different than acquiring brick and mortar businesses? And building kind of that portfolio of what I enjoy working on, which is infrastructure and working with other software engineers and developers and finding businesses inside that space to buy.
So, I mean, that's really impressive, but I like that you share with us. I mean, you had 18, 20 years of experience in that market. So it didn't happen overnight. But I would like to ask you, were you drawn more, like you just wanted to leave the corporate world? You wanted to have some time freedom? What is something that drew you to, build your business? Did you have like a plan, like you said, I want to build a business, and then you learn, oh, I can actually acquire a business. I don't have to start from scratch? Or how did that look, that transition?
That's a good question because I think a lot of your audience will resonate with what I went through, which was I kept having these, I call them quarter life crises, where I would just up and quit the job I was in because I just knew I was enjoying certain aspects of it, but it wasn't the right direction for me. There was something wrong fundamentally. So I would always take these quarter life breaks, maybe take 3 to 6 months off, kind of reassess. And a challenge in technology is you get a bit of a golden handcuff problem. Because we usually make pretty high income, once you get going in that career, it's very hard to transition to something else. It's very difficult to just say, well, I'm going to go laterally and work in retail because you're never going to be making nearly as much money. We've also invested a ton in our education. So you kind of want to stay in the technology space, but you might want to approach it a little differently. So each time I had a quarter life crisis, I would come back roughly into the same world, but I would look at it and approach it from a different angle. Maybe this time I'm going to work more on support for like sales and development. And I was getting to see more different levels inside businesses, get to work more with marketing, work more with finance. And long term, that was really beneficial because when I go out and do this on my own, now I have a little bit of an idea of how marketing works inside large companies, how accounting and finance works. So
Yeah.
again, not a plan, but that's kind of how it worked out. And then to make that transition, I find it was incredibly valuable to have that corporate experience. I know there's a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs right away. They don't want to work in corporations, but one has to remember that the vast majority of your customers, as long as if you're not selling to consumers, are going to be large companies. And if you're going to be selling into that, you need to understand how the politics works in there. How does budgeting and finance work? And having worked in there really helps. So I always encourage people, stay corporate for a while until maybe you're like in the middle management, and then start looking at starting your own business on the side or looking to acquire a business.
And I think also big corporations really teach us, I mean, if they're a good corporation, they teach us about system and operations. And a lot of startup entrepreneurs who are self-employed, they struggle with this. And you should actually, from the beginning, strategize and understand, okay, I need job descriptions, I need a system, who is doing what, and how will this grow, and start looking at it as a company in order to grow. Otherwise, a lot of people just stay self-employed for a long time. If they're happy, that's fine. But if we want to build a big company, we need to understand the structure of a big company. And that's for me also, when I worked in corporations, it really helped me. I was always in operations, and like you said, and then learning sales and marketing, and that was the experience that helped me when I started too. So I absolutely agree, and I think that can be very helpful. Some people, they hate it, so they feel like, in prison in corporations, which I understand, and I'm the first one who loves some more freedom, but I do think that there is a lot to learn from corporations.
Yes, I agree. And I can also speak a little bit to this viewing businesses that are for sale as a buyer. Not having those systems in there that you learn at corporations can really affect the valuation when you're trying to sell. So if it's a hodgepodge of, hey, I just have everything in my brain, there's nothing written on paper, it really affects the valuation of your business when I look at it, because now I have to clean that up. Somehow there has to be a knowledge transfer. That might make me say, we need to keep you on for a year and we're going to do an earnout instead of just giving you all the money up front. So getting that experience in corporations, that how you do a lot of that structure and process, is really beneficial.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more. You now run a huge portfolio, right? 8-figure portfolio. Tell us a little bit more about acquiring businesses. What do you just said you're looking, to have some structure, but are they all IT businesses? When you're purchasing businesses, are you like stuck with, this is what I know and this is businesses, or you like to diversify and try something new?
Yeah, so I've tried both. Currently, I focus very narrowly because I have tried to look at a bunch of things. I really like infrastructure businesses. I like businesses that are selling directly to engineers and other development teams, so products and services that are in there. I did step outside of my competence and acquire a 7-figure business that was in the e-commerce space. I very quickly learned that that wasn't probably the smartest thing I've ever done. And as we all do, we learn more from our mistakes than from when we do things correctly. So that's kind of where I realized, oh, I need to stay somewhat narrow in where my competence is, where my team has already been built. And so for me, it's important to stay kind of narrow in that area. And then if I'm looking to diversify, I'm going to do it outside of online business investing. I'm going to look at real estate or equities and bonds. So that's how I kind of diversify, but I'm still very narrow inside my acquisition criteria.
So do you advise someone who maybe doesn't have background of IT, but obviously IT is such a big and strong industry, do you still advise them to maybe acquire a business? And if they want, what type of business they should look for? Like some business that needs their strength, or, how much of the IT skills and knowledge they need if they want to have IT business?
Yeah, it's one of the first questions I usually get. If I'm not technically oriented, should I be acquiring a software business? And it's a tough question to answer because you do end up having to run software teams, work on software projects, do the planning. And if you haven't had that experience, I get very hesitant to say, yes, you can still go out and buy a software business. I would not want to recommend that to someone who maybe hasn't worked in the tech industry, or at least worked with other software projects. So one of the questions, that's obviously the first question. The second question is, should I try maybe with like a small starter business and see if maybe I can do the software piece, because I've had some experience with it in my corporate world. So that's another question. And I try and tackle a lot of these on my website of, should I start with a less expensive, smaller business to see if this is right for me? And there's definitely reasons to do that. And maybe there's different reasons not to do that. or start with the larger business, put all of your capital involved with that, and then that's what you're going to run forward with. So those are kind of the two questions I guess I think about is, should I be doing this if I'm not technically oriented in the first place? And should I start with a small business, or should I put everything into that first acquisition? It's a question for each person. I try and bring up each point that I can online, and just hopefully that helps people come up with the right decision for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think it's very important to, it's very important, but like you said, we learn from our mistakes, and it's not one answer fits all. I mean, there are people who are not in that industry. They acquire and they're just an investor and they can still, get their money. But I think definitely some kind of background and knowledge, it's very, very important to understand. Yep. I mean, at the end of the day, linguistics and understanding how software business works. If we have no idea how we're gonna help it grow, and maybe they need sales, but how are we gonna help sales if we don't understand even the product? So definitely, yeah, I like your advice. Look at what you're a bit familiar with, at least it's some percentage, and then go there. But tell us a little bit more. I love to ask my guests about mistakes you made. I'm sure you made a lot of mistakes in building your business. I have guests with these huge success stories, and it's very inspiring, but sometimes intimidating, because we feel like this person is there, and so many of my listeners, and even me, sometimes we compare each other. Oh, I'm still not there. These people build these huge companies and businesses. So, and then when you interview people, you hear, like, I love hearing their struggles and the stories, because it resonates with us. You're like, oh, I've been there. Oh, I'm having that challenge and things. So what are some mistakes that maybe are interesting for you to share with us that you made building your business?
Yeah, so I think one thing to think is this is always a progression of your career. And so when I started, I had probably the minimum financial literacy of what I was doing in the acquisition space. It was also 10 years ago, and online acquisitions 10 years ago were not nearly as mature of an industry as it is today. So back then, I was pretty much buying everything all cash, which lowers your return. I do that differently now. So that's not really a mistake, but that's a maturing of the process of what I'm doing. I think one thing that people can succumb to is if your first acquisition goes really well, you think you can just go out and do another one. So it's very important that your first goes well, but if you do 2 or 3 that are really well done, you have to be careful not to kind of overdo it. And I think that's what I did, where I thought, oh, this is easy. I'll just keep buying all the businesses and put them into my little blender, and this is going to be great. And that's where I came across acquiring that wrong business, because I thought I could do all of it. So that's definitely a lesson learned for me. Staying narrow in my criteria, understanding that there is a lot of work to do when you acquire a business. That first year is going to be really busy, and you can't be, buying 2 or 3 in the same quarter. And that one business that I acquired that didn't work out, I was able to sell it for a little bit more money, but it was never exactly what we expected. And it was definitely taking time away from the businesses that were doing really well. And here you are trying to save a business that isn't doing well, and all that time you invest in it, you're just wasting from doing the other ones. So it's just this long maturity process where you are always going to be a novice when you start, and that's okay. And you kind of learn as you go, hopefully.
Yes. And if somebody wants to start, what are different options? Like you said, you buy all cash. So how are in IT industry acquisition working now? There are many people who never even thought about maybe acquiring business. It doesn't have to necessarily be IT business, but in general, acquiring different online or offline businesses. Can you guide us? Like, what are different options? What you think it works depending on your situation or your financials and things like that? What are the options that people have?
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit of how you buy your first house. So if you're aware that you might like to buy a business in 5 to 10 years, maybe that's when you would be looking to move out of corporate, you can start saving a little bit now, because you want to have a little bit of cash to be able to get into the acquisition. Because the industry has matured, there are now businesses that do online financing. You can also do seller financing. So if you're bringing 20%, maybe the seller's doing 20% of financing, you raise a little money from one of the online businesses that will either issue debt or kind of loan you the money. So you can start to stack it together, because that's a big challenge that people have, is where am I going to get the money to replace my current salary. If you're trying to buy a business that's, let's say, 4 times multiple of what the profit is each year, so let's say that's $100,000 now. So you need $400,000 to acquire this business. How are you going to put that all together? So that's kind of a big challenge that I think people have. So if you think about that 5 years prior, you can start to address that, start learning that financial literacy, start contacting people that can help you with the loans. And one thing, I'll jump back to our prior question. One way I've seen people solve the non-technical founder or non-technical acquisition problem is going in with a partner, right? And so 2 entrepreneurs, one is maybe the marketing person and the other one is the technical. That actually works quite well for these acquisitions because a lot of these businesses have grown to the point where the original founder hasn't done a lot of marketing and wants to move on to something else. So what they really need is somebody that's really good at marketing, but also can keep the technical things working. So putting those two together, that can really help too. So when you're in the corporate world and you're meeting all of your professional friends, that might be where you could find a partner that could do the stuff that you're not as good at, and make a good partnership in the future there.
Yeah, that is actually the great thing for many people looking. And connected to that, in the businesses you invested, do you usually purchase 100% business, or are you sometimes purchasing just ownership of, 25% or 15% of companies? Of course, there's some companies that are very expensive, so you just can buy a share, but still it brings the profit. So what is your strategy? Do you mostly want to be the only owner, or are you investing in businesses where there are other owners as well?
I really enjoy being the only owner, but I have taken on, my partners are the technical team. So once I kind of figured out what I was doing, I offered them the opportunity if, hey, we're looking at this new acquisition. Do you want to put some money in and be part owner? So it's kind of cool for them because they work on one side and they get paid for that. And then they also get paid any profits that come out. And it's helping educate them on how would you do this if you wanted to be an investor in this in the future. But almost always the entrepreneur is looking to sell the entire asset. They're not usually looking just for an infusion of cash. So in some manner, we will have 100% of the control. It'll either all be me or me and the team, and like 20% my wife might have, something like that. So yeah, I'm really looking for pretty much full ownership in the group of that's working with it.
Yeah. So, Michael, as we're towards the end of the episode, I love to ask something that maybe we didn't, mention, but you think it's very important for entrepreneurs, not necessarily in IT. Is there any advice or anything you would like to share with people who are starting or growing their business on this journey?
Yes. Yeah. I think we can probably go back to what we spoke about in the very beginning, that it's okay to work in corporate and prepare for your entrepreneurship journey. You're going to learn a lot of things that you really can't learn out on your own. And corporations and businesses, and even small businesses, those are going to be your customers. Learning how that process works is incredibly important. So don't feel bad if you want to be an entrepreneur and you just aren't doing it just yet. What you're learning in the real world is going to be beneficial. And kind of a second thing I would bring up is it's also okay to be an operator like myself. I think we do push a lot of things out as we all need to be entrepreneurs. We all need to be entrepreneurs. I'm not particularly good at standing a business up from 0 to 1. I'm really good at going from 1 to 10. So for me, I had to take some time to get comfortable with just being an operator and letting that entrepreneur feeling go away a little bit, where I'm looking at the entrepreneur that builds a business and then looks to someone like me, like they need me to help go to the next level. So it's okay to not be a full entrepreneur as well. And I want people to be comfortable with that. And so those are kind of the two things now that I've been doing this for a while that I have learned. And hopefully that gives at least a little bit of an idea spark in your listeners, just for how they would like to set this career up long term.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of us, we're beating ourselves up sometimes and we expect we're good in all the areas, but no CEO, no entrepreneur is good at everything. And I think it's hard at the beginning to accept that because, you have to say, oh, this person is better than me in this. And it's a little bit of ego thing. I think entrepreneurs like to think they can do everything the best, but I like that because from your experience, what we can learn is that it saves you time, it saves you energy, you understand yourself, your strengths and weaknesses. And you're just like, if I focus on where my strengths are, I can build this much faster. And thank you for sharing this story with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure, Michael. And we're going to invite everyone to connect with Michael, connect with him on LinkedIn, social media, follow It's Such Inspiring Entrepreneur, and make sure to share this episode with at least one person that can benefit from it. Give us some likes, hearts, and comments, and download and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I see you in the next episode.